On March 10th, 1988, the world lost Andy Gibb at just 30 years old. It was the kind of loss that felt unfinished, as though a story had been interrupted before reaching its natural conclusion. There was no grand farewell, no final bow under bright lights, only a sudden silence that left fans searching for meaning. Andy had once been one of the brightest young stars of his generation, a voice that carried emotion so effortlessly it felt personal to anyone listening. Yet behind the glow of fame was a life moving at a pace few could sustain. His passing was not just the loss of a performer, but of a young man still trying to understand himself. What makes his story linger is not only how it ended, but how much promise it carried. Promise that never had the chance to fully unfold. Growing up in the shadow of greatness. Andy was born into a family where music was not just a passion but a way of life. His older brothers, members of the legendary Bee Gees, had already begun shaping their path in the industry. From an early age, Andy was surrounded by melodies, rehearsals, and conversations about performance. It was a world many would dream of. Yet for him, it came with a quiet complexity. While he admired his brothers, he also felt the weight of their success. Childhood for Andy wasn't entirely ordinary. It unfolded in backstage corridors and long car rides rather than playgrounds. He learned about music before he had the chance to fully understand himself. That environment nurtured his talent, but it also blurred the line between who he was and who people expected him to become. Even as a child, he carried a name that set him apart, and with it, an unspoken pressure to live up to something already established. Finding his own voice. As he grew older, Andy began searching for a sense of identity that was truly his own. Music became both his refuge and his path forward. With a guitar in hand and a natural instinct for melody, he started writing and performing. Not to compete, but to express something personal. His early performances were modest, far from the massive stages he would later command. Yet those small moments mattered. They gave him a glimpse of what it felt like to stand alone, to be seen not as someone's younger brother, but as an artist in his own right. There was a sincerity in his approach, a desire to connect rather than impress. Still, beneath that determination was a fragile sense of self, one that hadn't fully formed before the world began paying attention. It was a delicate balance, wanting to belong to the music, while still figuring out where he belonged within it. A meteoric rise. Everything changed almost overnight. At just 19, Andy achieved something extraordinary. 3 consecutive #1 hits on the Billboard charts, beginning with "I Just Want to Be Your Everything." It was a level of success most artists spend a lifetime chasing. Suddenly, he was everywhere, on television, on magazine covers, and on the radio. His voice, soft yet powerful, became the soundtrack of an era. To the public, he was effortless, young, charming, and full of life. But success at that speed leaves little room for reflection. Each achievement quickly gave way to the next, creating a cycle that never seemed to pause. For Andy, there was barely time to process what was happening. He was living a dream, yet moving so fast that he couldn't fully experience it. The world saw a rising star. Andy felt the pressure of keeping that momentum alive. Living in the spotlight, fame brought admiration, but it also created a version of Andy that the world expected to see. He became the Prince of Pop, a carefully shaped image that left little room for change. Every appearance required the same warmth, the same charm, the same familiar presence. Over time, that consistency became limiting. As music trends shifted and new sounds emerged, Andy found himself caught between who he was and who audiences wanted him to remain. He was capable of growth, of exploring new directions, but the industry often favored predictability over risk. This created a quiet tension, one that wasn't visible on stage but deeply felt behind it. The spotlight that once lifted him up began to feel like something he had to maintain rather than enjoy. And in that space, the joy of creation slowly became overshadowed by the need to keep up. When the world changed. By the end of the 1970s, the musical landscape was shifting. Disco, the genre that had carried Andy to fame, began to lose its hold on audiences. Events like Disco Demolition Night symbolized a cultural turning point. It wasn't just about music changing, it was about an entire era being left behind. For Andy, this shift was particularly challenging. He hadn't done anything wrong. He simply found himself tied to a moment that was fading. The public's taste moved on, and with it, the attention that had once seemed constant. This wasn't a dramatic fall, but a gradual repositioning. He was still recognized, still respected, but no longer at the center of the conversation. For someone who had risen so quickly, adjusting to that change required a different kind of strength, one that comes not from success, but from adaptation. Searching for stability. As his career entered a more uncertain phase, Andy began to look for balance in other areas of his life. Television appearances, live performances, and steady work kept him visible, but they didn't fully replace the excitement of his earlier success. Behind the scenes, he was navigating a new reality, one where momentum no longer carried him forward automatically. It required effort, intention, and resilience. During this time, he also explored quieter pursuits, including learning to fly, which offered a sense of calm and control that his career often lacked. In those moments, away from the noise, he could simply exist without expectation. Music, too, became more personal again. Instead of chasing hits, he returned to writing and reflecting, trying to reconnect with the reasons he started in the first place. It was a period of searching, not for fame, but for grounding. The weight of personal life. Andy's personal life reflected many of the same challenges he faced professionally. His early marriage and the birth of his daughter brought moments of joy and a glimpse of stability. For a time, family life offered something the spotlight couldn't, a sense of normalcy. But balancing that with the demands of fame proved difficult. The pace he had been living at for years didn't easily slow down, and the transition between public and private life was not always smooth. Relationships require time, presence, and emotional space, things that were often in short supply. When his marriage ended, it wasn't marked by drama, but by a quiet realization that life had moved too fast for certain foundations to fully form. This chapter of his life revealed something deeper. That success in one area does not automatically bring fulfillment in another. It highlighted the importance of balance, something Andy was still learning to navigate. A quiet goodbye. In the end, Andy's story didn't conclude with a dramatic moment, but with a gradual fading. His passing at 30 felt less like an ending and more like a pause that came too soon. There was no final performance to define his legacy, only the memory of what he had already given. Fans were left with his music, his voice, and the feeling that there was more he could have become. His journey serves as a reminder of how complex success can be, how it can uplift and challenge at the same time. Andy didn't lose his talent or his passion. He simply carried more than one person should have to at such a young age. And in that, there is something deeply human, something that resonates far beyond fame. The legacy he left behind. Today, Andy Gibb is remembered not just for his chart-topping hits, but for the emotion he brought to his music. His songs continue to play, carrying the warmth and vulnerability that made him so special. He represents a moment in time when music felt deeply personal, when voices connected directly with the heart. But his legacy goes beyond sound. It is also a story about growing up too quickly, about navigating expectations, and about the importance of understanding oneself beyond external success. Andy's life reminds us that talent alone is not enough. We also need space to grow, to rest, and to simply be. Though his time was short, the impact he left behind continues to resonate, not as a story of loss, but as a reflection of what it means to live, to strive, and to feel deeply.